Hi guys, Olive here. Here today to talk to you about some of my bookish pet peeves. About 1,000,000 years ago, aka when I first started this channel, I made a bookish pet peeves video, but all of the pet peeves I talked about in that video had something to do with books in a physical sense. So I talked a lot about book covers, book titles, book design in general, and I remember saying in that video, I don't know how I still remember this, but I remember saying that maybe someday I would make a video about all the pet peeves I have when it comes to book content, the insides of books, if you will. Well, now, many years later, I'm finally making that video. So today, I'm going to talk about things within books that rub me the wrong way. And I hope hearing me say that is an indicator that this video is going to be a little bit less positive than my other videos normally are. I love books, and I normally really enjoy being sunshiny about them, but I think it's important to be honest, and just like with everything we love out there in this world, there are things that I really don't like in a reading experience. I have read a lot of books in my time, and there are some things that commonly pop up that I wish just didn't. And I'm going to talk about what those are and why I feel that way. If that doesn't sound appealing to you, if you prefer the videos that are more positive, then there's no pressure to watch this one. Just skip on over it and I'll see you in the next video, which I'm sure will be back to being sunshiny. But if you enjoy some mild ranting, then I dedicate this one to you. My first pet peeve is when a character within a book can do just whatever they want, regardless of their financial situation. I'm pretty sure this is the thing that ruined Night Film by Marisha Pessl for me. The main character in that book is a disgraced journalist. He can't get hired anywhere. We're told he is broke. And yet he has a nice apartment in New York City. And as he's investigating the main mystery of the book, he's just throwing money at every problem he comes up against. It made me want to scream at the book, where did that money come from? I just cannot suspend my disbelief when it comes to money. I don't know if that's because I was raised by a single parent and we didn't have an abundance of it, or if it's because I've worked in finance and I've taken 1,000,000 business courses. I'm just never going to be the kind of person to be like, oh yeah, I'm sure he had money for that. It'll never be me. If that guy was that broke, he would be spending his days job searching or bartending, anything to earn some money. He wouldn't be investigating the death of some random girl. It just wouldn't happen. So yeah, when characters magically have all this money, as though they've typed in the Rosebud cheat code in The Sims, I start to short circuit. Next, I tend to really dislike books that have a plot in which a lot happens, but then at the same time, nothing is really happening. It's kind of like in school when you're given busy work, where you're technically doing something, like a worksheet, but it's not really doing anything. It's just kind of empty action. It's doing something for the sake of doing something. You're not gaining more knowledge by doing this worksheet. It's just meant to keep you busy. It's kind of like that, but in book form. This was the main issue that I had with The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. I actually enjoyed sitting down with this book. I found it to be really good company. But after I was done reading, I kind of wondered where all that time went because I read a bunch of stuff, but it was nothing that actually moved the plot forward. So it was stuff happening just for the sake of stuff happening. I would immediately forget big chunks of the book because it was a bunch of nothing. That empty plot thing was also one of many issues that I had with the Yonalosi Writing Camp for Girls by Anton Disclafani. I just don't get along with junk food plots. And let me be clear, I'm not talking about lightweight, feel-good fiction books, the ones that go down really easy. As long as everything within one of those books serves the grander story and is memorable, then that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about having a bunch of stuff within a book that doesn't really need to be there, I guess just to extend the page count. I'm the type of reader, writer, reviewer who believes that everything within a book needs to serve the story that you're telling, otherwise it needs to go. And when stuff like that is left in, I don't like it. But on a somewhat similar note, there is another thing that authors sometimes do. It's not very frequent, but I know it when I see it. It just drives me up a wall. I like to call it plot baiting. This is when there's a threat of a conflict, but then that threat just evaporates. And the threat of the conflict becomes the conflict itself. It's kind of like, I think that's going to be a problem. Oh, no, wait, it's not actually a problem. We're all readers here, and I think we all know that in order to have a successful story, there has to be some kind of a conflict. That's what makes a book interesting. But a conflict isn't the threat of a conflict, just looming over the book until it's dismissed, never resolved. It's just dismissed because it wasn't ever a conflict in the first place. This could be, and I'm just making this up here, this could be something like in a book, the family that's at the center of a book is at risk of losing their business because their landlord has threatened to increase their rent. But then by the end of the book, in which a whole bunch of unrelated stuff happens, the landlord just changes their mind. So they don't have to worry about it after all. Again, that's not something I've pulled from any specific book. That's just something I made up to illustrate my point. But that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. I hope that made it a little bit clearer. I dislike stories like that so much because they just feel so cheap, and it feels like a cop-out on the part of the author. They've not even gone to the trouble of creating a conflict. They've definitely not gone to the trouble of resolving that conflict, and that's their job as an author. So I kind of wonder why I've spent my time reading their stuff. I've experienced this so many times, but I can't even give you a specific example of a book that does this because they are so unmemorable. I know it in the moment, and then that book goes completely out of my head because there was nothing substantial about the book, because there wasn't a good conflict. So while I can't give you a specific book that did this, I can tell you that the TV show Downton Abbey did this just about every week. And speaking of cheap tactics, I also really don't care for dream scenes, especially when they start off a new chapter or a new section within a book, like when you start reading and everything seems really strange until you start to put the pieces together that that character is dreaming. This has been done a million times, and I feel like so often it's done in order to trick the reader, even for a brief moment, into thinking that the things within the dream are happening in real life. Also, I understand that dreams are an expression of the unconscious mind, or whatever it is that Freud said, but I really don't like that dreams are so frequently used by authors as a plot device in order to get us deeper inside the mind of a character. I find that to be really lazy writing. I, as a reader, should be able to figure out what's going on inside the mind of a character based on what's going on with them and what they're doing in the waking world. And then there's the fact that hearing about other people's dreams doesn't seem to be anybody's favorite pastime. Unless you are a therapist for a specific person, they're just not that interesting to hear about. I think the only exception to this pet peeve would be The Anatomy of Dreams by Chloe Benjamin. There are all sorts of dreams described in that book, but that's because that book is about dreams and dreaming and sleep studies. So I guess unless your book is expressly about dreaming, no dream scenes for me, please. The penultimate pet peeve I'm going to discuss in this video is historical fiction that waters down real-life historical figures or just completely fails to capture their big personalities on the page. And I feel like this happens a lot in historical fiction that doubles as so-called women's fiction. And I feel like it's done somewhat intentionally to make those larger-than-life types of figures more palatable. The two examples that I have for this pet peeve are both historical fiction books that are set in Russia. I've studied a lot of Russian history throughout my life, so that's how I know that Pushkin and his wife in The Lost Season of Love and Snow by Jennifer Lamb and Pasternak in The Secrets We Kept by Laura Prescott were not done justice at all. And I just don't understand it because there is so much information out there about those people and they had such big personalities. There is no reason why they need to read like cardboard cutouts of human beings. I feel like one of the most fun things about reading historical fiction books that have characters who were once real people is that you as a reader get to feel like you're meeting that person when you'll never get the opportunity to in real life, most frequently because they're gone, they've died, they no longer longer exist. So even if the character isn't 100% historically accurate, I still think those characters should resemble the people who they actually were. And when they don't, it kind of gets on my nerves. But I saved my biggest pet peeve for last. This is the thing that irritates me the most. If I could eliminate books like this off the planet, I would. I absolutely detest books that rely heavily on emotional manipulation. Let me preface all of this by saying that I am a very logical person. I am very open about that. I mention it on a fairly regular basis. But what I don't say very frequently is that a lot of people in my life are not just more emotional than me, they are highly emotional people. I like having highly emotional people in my orbit because I think it creates a nice balance. And also I like to be able to learn from the people that I surround myself with. And I get very protective of those people. But since I am more on the logical side, when I read a book that is attempting to slam down on a button to try to get an emotional response out of the reader, I can tell right away that they're trying to do it. And I first find it just unbearably lazy and mean, frankly. And then I start to get angry on behalf of the emotional people in my life. Like, please don't try to mess with them in that way. Please don't try to make them cry just because you know you can. And let me be crystal clear about what I mean by this. I am not saying that every single book that makes you cry is an emotionally manipulative book. There's a difference between an emotionally manipulative book and a book that has made you cry because you've invested your time, your energy, your love into this book. You've spent time with characters, and then eventually something bad happens to them, as it probably should. Again, the whole conflict discussion that we had earlier on in this video. If by the end of a book you feel so connected to that book, to those characters, and it makes you cry, then that's good storytelling. But emotional manipulation is something like using cancer as a plot twist, or including sad scene after sad scene after sad scene, just because the author knows that an emotional reader enjoys a good cathartic cry every now and again, which is actually what Susan Cain talked about in her latest book called Bittersweet. I reviewed that here on this channel in case you're interested. But basically, if an author uses a shortcut to get an emotional response out of a reader, that is an emotionally manipulative book, and I cannot stand those. There are two specific books that come to mind when I'm thinking about this topic. I know there must be a ton more out there, but I tend to avoid books that I get the sense are doing this kind of thing because I know how angry it makes me, and I really don't want to put myself through that. I want to keep my blood pressure low. But two that I have read that I definitely felt were emotionally manipulative are Salt to the Sea and The Storied Life of A.J. Fickery. And it's hard for me to say those because I know so many people love those books, and I can't even blame them because they're big-hearted people. So of course they would feel so much when they read a book like that, but it does bring that protective side of me out. And I feel like when I read one of those books, it tells me everything I need to know about the author, and I'll just never read anything they write ever again. So those are my pet peeves about book content. At least all the ones I could think of. If I think of any others, or if I develop any others later on down the line, maybe I'll make another video, but I'm just not sure I will because I tend to be a pretty laid back person. Not a whole lot gets to me. Except the things I mentioned in today's video. Those things definitely do, but admittedly, I don't encounter these things too often. If you have thoughts on any of these, or if you have any of your own pet peeves you would like to share, I'd love to hear from you in the comment section below. And at the bottom of the description box below, you'll find links to everywhere you can find me around the internets, including Goodreads and Instagram, the two places where I'm the most active, if you would like to keep up with what I am reading and writing about right now. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.